Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Branding Bud Live, the live stream that's 100% THC, 0% WTF. Every week, we bring business people to talk about the business of cannabis. I'm David Paleschuck, the founder of Branding Bud Consulting Group and the author of Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis, the first book on cannabis branding. And I'm joined by my co-host, Adriana Hemans, the Director of Marketing at Green Meadows and my BCF, Best Cannabis Friend. Hey, Adriana, how are you today?
Hey, David. So good to be here with you. And thank you for that intro. We are seriously going deep today with our topic. And I'm so excited. And I hope that we're making up for a little bit of lost time because we missed a couple of weeks with our audience. And I have to say, I really missed everybody. It's good to be back here on Branding Bud Live. And I missed spending time with you too, David. We were recording other content, but now we're going to do it with our whole friend group, which I love.
That's right, the community that shows up every week, and we're thrilled and we thank them for doing that. I am super, super, super excited today. Not only do we have a great show, but this is actually our first sponsored show. So let me talk about our first sponsor, which is really exciting. High Hopes, which is a creative agency that believes in us, which I'm so thrilled about, to sponsor the show. So High Hopes is a creative agency. They specialize in cannabis. They've been in the industry for over 10 years, so they know really exactly what cannabis brand owners and cannabis brands go through. And what they do is they help they help build better brands through marketing, packaging, website development, and you should check them out at I'veGotHigherHopes.com. So thank you, High Hopes, for believing in us. We really appreciate it. And secondly, what I'm super excited about is, like you said, we're going deep today. We're getting a little spiritual, or hopefully a lot spiritual. And we're doing that with two of my favorite people in the cannabis industry, Swami Chaitanya and Nikki Lastreto, the co-founders of Swami Select, which is a cannabis brand that's based in the Emerald Triangle. And we are super excited to talk to them about cannabis, about spirituality, and about the intersection of the two. So some of the topics we'll be talking about today and some of the questions hopefully we'll be answering are: what are the common spiritual and philosophical beliefs associated with cannabis use in various cultures throughout history? Are there specific cultivars or variety of cannabis that are believed to be more suitable for spiritual exploration? And how will the future of cannabis and spirituality evolve, especially as legislation and legalization continue? So we're real excited to chat with them. And that said, why don't we bring them out?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Hi there. Welcome.
Hi, Nikki. Hi, Swami.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello, hello. Thanks for having us here as your guests. We're really excited.
Yeah, it's really nice to be there, and nice to see you again, David.
Oh,
and meet you, Ariane.
Yeah, we already have a question coming in, so I know that our audience is really excited to chat with you as well. But if you don't mind, I just want to kick things off, and I want to ask Nikki to tell us a little bit about your background, what you're passionate about, what drives you. Let's start there. I feel like that would be a good place.
Okay, well, thanks. I'm born and raised in San Francisco at the right time because I was a young flower child. I didn't even have to run away to do it, and started smoking weed in 1969 and sold my first lids on the streets at that point.
How old
and
were you?
No, we don't want to talk about that. I was pretty young, and but it was I've been on a great cannabis journey my whole life. I feel very, very blessed that way, and living especially in India for many, many years and other countries has really taught me a lot about how it's perceived around the world. So I love the question about what's my passion, because I do have a passion, and my passion currently right now is really to change the image of specifically craft sun-grown cannabis that is being treated as less quality than indoor, which is just totally wrong. And this is my whole thing, is to just change this image, to bring it up, to have people realize that if you're truly a cannabis connoisseur, this is what you want, because it's the purest, it's the clean, it's just grown with love and certain care that you just don't get in large indoor or greenhouse grows, and grown regeneratively and all of that. So that's really my passion and I do that through education, through our social media, and also through something I produce every year called the Mendocino Craft Farmers Auction up here in Mendocino County. And we're just trying to raise it up to the level of, in Napa, they had the Napa Valley wine auction for years. That's where we're trying to bring it to this level. So people think of Mendocino and they think, oh, that's the best weed in the world, So that's my real passion. My other passion is putting on parties. I could put on parties all day. I love doing that. So most of it's, I guess, about community and bringing people together to recognize our blessings, really.
Well, I want to party with you, Nikki.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
So when we have a party, my job is to roll joints and get everybody stoned.
Love it.
I bet you're a pro at that.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
good at
that.
So, Swami, normally we don't ask our guests the same question, one after the other. But what are you passionate about? What drives you? Obviously you've had a very interesting life and continue to have an interesting life. What gets you up every morning?
Well, first of all, I'm passionate about my wife, Nikki.
Aww.
And, we just have been together a very, very long time, 40 something years now or something. Yeah. And it always is fresh and love. But in terms of cannabis, I'm really passionate about, similar to Nikki, but what I want to do is enable people to find the cannabis that works best for them and the methodology for getting there. And so I want to, try and get people to move beyond just, what's the highest THC, or is it indica or sativa, or is it indoor outdoor, and get down to what are really the inner voices within cannabis that can speak to you. And it's through the nose that we know what is going to work for us. And we kind of have a saying that if it smells good to you, if you really like the smell, it's probably going to be good for you. And it's through the nose. And I want to now indicate that we're working things which way beyond terpenes in terms of the aromas of cannabis. Terpenes are 40 to 50% maybe of the aroma, but there are many other volatile organic compounds, esters, ketones, aldehydes, benzoids, all these other things which make the nose. It's never just one thing. And with cannabis, it's also never just one thing. So this plant has 1,000 compounds, and you want to find out which one works for you. So go through your olfactory senses to get there. That's what I'm passionate about, teaching about the nose of cannabis.
It's so interesting. One of the words when I first came into the cannabis industry 12 years ago, one of the first words I learned was organoleptic. And organoleptic is basically using your senses to smell, look at, touch a cannabis plant. And if those things ring true to you, those are your best indicators of will this particular cultivar work for you. So, what you just said is spot on with one of the first things I learned coming into the industry many years ago. If it smells right, if it looks right, if it feels right, it probably is right.
Wow,
Exactly.
I think that's the word for the day there, David. What is it? Organoleptic? I've never heard this word. I love it.
Organoleptic. Yeah.
We're all expanding our vocabularies today.
Yeah.
And we do have a question from someone in the audience who wants to know if the two of you will be at CannaFest.
Well, I don't think we will make it this weekend. We have to be over in Lake County at another event. So there's just so much going on. We definitely need clones of ourselves.
Yeah.
If we can find a way to get there, we will, but it's kind of doubtful at this point.
So as we're talking about new words and learning new things about spirituality, why don't we just level set for a moment and just define what spirituality is? Adriana, do you want to take this?
Okay.
Sure. I can go ahead and read this off, and you can follow along on our chart here, or if you would prefer, you can do a quick Google search, but basically it's the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. And this chart really breaks up what it means, how we define and separate spirituality versus religion.
Right. And sometimes how there's a blending of those two. And we'll talk a little bit more. We have some pretty interesting statistics later about spirituality and religion and how they interplay with cannabis. So now that we all understand what spirituality is, at least on the definitional level, why don't we jump into the conversation? Because because there's lots of things that I'm excited to get into.
Yeah. So, question. Let's start with Nikki. How far back does the historical use of cannabis for spiritual and religious purposes date? And if you could share about the cultures that that spearheaded it, that would be great to know too.
Well, as far as I know, it started, the oldest they have recorded right now is 2,800 years ago in China.
No, 2800 BC.
Oh, 2,800
That's
BC.
4,800
even longer.
years
Oh my
ago.
God. So 2,800 BC in China. And, you know, China's, it's all up there above China in the part above the Hindu Kush area. So that's where it all originally comes from. And at that point, it was used both spiritually and medicinally, which in a way are one and the same, because if you're feeling good, you're going to be able to contact your spiritual self a whole lot better than if you're concentrating on feeling sick. So they had something called the hemp fairy. And interesting, in Mandarin anyway, the word for cannabis is ma, and which of course is also mother and so many other things. So it just kind of is the mother of all of us, isn't it? It's the original mother plant. So they had the hemp fairy that provided the medicine for China. And then of course it spread from there all the way down. It started into the Hindu Kush, into India, all of these traditions into the, much later into the Muslim cultures, going down into either Northern Africa and into that area. And all of these cultures took it on as, again, not only medicine, but also as a spiritual component to their practices when they realized what it was doing to their heads. And it was kind of must have been a coincidence of how they even figured this out, that it wasn't just, oh, if I eat this or heat it, if I heat it, it's going to work better than if I don't heat it. I mean, think of all these things they had to figure out, right? And one of the stories I always love is how, was that the Scythians, Swami, that built the triangular tent?
Yes, the Scythians.
So they would have they put 3 sticks together to make a little tent and put some sort of probably animal skin or something over it at that point. And inside, and they would have a little cup or a piece of stone, probably is what it was. And on it, they'd put the cannabis to light it as incense. And then they discovered, oh my God, we're getting high too. Something's happening here. Our senses are coming to life. What's that word again, David? We're really happening. The organoleptics were really, really lightened up at that point. So, and they found that not only did this make their consciousness more aware, but it also helped them in communication with one another. It helped them in hunting and gathering because they were just more aware now of everything around them. So, and that of course would also be a spiritual boost. There's no question about it. So I'm going to, Swami has a lot more of the history under his belt. He doesn't wear a belt, but Swami has a lot more under his hat. Okay. He has a lot more of that history. And he's also, I have to say, has the brain to remember the dates, obviously a lot better than I do.
Well, first of all, I want to go back to the hemp fairy and the word ma. And the fact is that the word is ma, which is an upward thing, and then ma, which is mother, and then another way to say ma is horse, right. And another way to say ma is question mark. Right. So, I mean, these are sort of like fundamentals of a society, 4,000 years ago. But we also want to remember that in those days, all medicinal healing was spiritual, because a shaman who was doing the herbal gathering would also have incantations and magic rituals. They might do magic diagrams and so on. And that would all be part of the healing. Think of, movies as a kid when you'd go to a Native American and you'd say the medicine man would be doing all these things to heal someone. That's the most ancient form of medicine, which incorporates both medicinal herbs and also spiritual intervention, you might say. And so that's been characteristic of medicine for so long. And so the idea that the cannabis is something that opens all of your senses, it stimulates all your senses, and then by doing that, your smell, your taste, your sight, your touch, and your hearing. But at the next stage, it also opens your third eye, your sixth sense. And that's what Nikki was talking about when all these and the Scythians would stick their head into this little tent. They were hotboxing, right? And they would come out and they'd be giggling and laughing. And this is all documented by a famous historian, Herodotus, a Greek historian. He actually witnessed this and wrote about it. And he was already writing in 450 BC or something like that. So now these warriors would come out of the hotbox giggling and laughing, but then also they would have a higher communication, as Nikki mentioned, through the third eye connection, right? So they were kind of telepathic, which meant hunting game or something like that. You can be silent, but still communicate. So it was really elevating one's awareness of the world and sort of the dimension that you're all kind of in a same wavelength.
Wow. So I mean, you kind of jumped into my next question. So there are lots of texts and artifacts, if you will, that show us the history of cannabis throughout time.
Oh, definitely, because there's a whole in ancient pottery, they find pottery in these grave sites they've dug up. And this is in the area Nikki mentioned in the back end of China, the far western part of China, but it's also the far eastern part of the Siberian steppes and all of that, and the Altai Mountains and the Heavenly Mountains. And that's where cannabis, so far they've figured out, has most likely originated from. It also happens to be the same area where they domesticated the horse. And this is an area that has major archaeological significance, as they've dug up these graves from these people, and they find cannabis there, and they find what they call corded ware. And this is ceramics that were fired, and they were wrapped before they were fired with a cord, a string. And that string, of course, was made of hemp. And so they know this because not all of it burnt. So the hemp twisted around the thing made a kind of a decorative surface on the pottery. But then also within the pottery, they found cannabis residues, from being burnt. Or also in the early days, they probably more often made it as a beverage. Remember, they didn't have paper, so they weren't smoking joints. And they probably had these little hollow stones that they put a coal on top of and did it that way. But they would more often probably would have made a beverage. And the famous god of India, Lord Shiva, he's famous for drinking what we call today bhang, right? And bhang is that substance made from the crushed cannabis plants mixed with some water. And it's a wonderfully refreshing beverage.
But it does need to be heated up, right, to get decarboxylated to actually do the trick.
Actually, it does a different thing that way.
Really?
No, because when I make what you do nowadays to make the bong is you would heat, as Nikki says, you get an iron skillet, put a little butter or ghee in the bottom, and then put your crushed up leaves and flour in there, and just heat it up just so it gets warm, right? And that's the decarboxylation you're talking about. Then you mix it with other things. But there's also a way to do it with just the raw flour that's aged, right? And so as flour gets older, it also turns the THCA into just regular THC just simply through aging. So, but anyway, I think they did probably drink it more often than smoke it. But it's still a major part of religious festivals in India honoring Shiva.
Interesting. And I too have heard every so often about fermentation being a way of decarboxylating too. So perhaps that's how that takes place.
Yes, they could just set it with some water out in the sun in a covered thing.
It's true.
And we actually do that now, not with cannabis, but with fermentation of weeds and grasses here we use as part of our regenerative farming. We let them ferment out in the hot sun, but in a sealed container, and they just sort of bubble up, like a fermentation. It's not a distillation; it's a fermentation like beer or wine.
Right. Super interesting. All right. Well, Adriana, do you want to jump into?
Yes. Sorry, I was almost just about to interrupt you, David. Yeah, so we do every week, we have 2 stats that we like to share with our audience and our guests. And this is a way to kind of illustrate the points that we're talking about, but also just for fun, because it's a fun guessing game. So why not? So let's throw that question up there. And I see we have quite a few faces and people chatting us up and saying hi in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Feel free to go ahead and take your guess, drop it in the chat. The first question is, according to the Cannabis and Psychedelics User Survey, how many participants claim a spiritual motivation for cannabis consumption? Is it A, 12%, B, 25%, C, 37%, or D, none of the above? And this is the Cannabis and Psychedelics User Survey. This is something that I did not even know existed. Interesting.
Right.
Really?
Well, this
How
is
far we go.
every week. This is where I get to say, audience, this is your chance to shine. I just love saying that. So, audience, feel free, jump in, take a guess, and
Yep.
we'll see.
I see already three guesses for B and 2 guesses for C and 1 guess for A. So we're pretty divided on this one.
That's right. And a shout out to Carolyn. Carolyn's the CMO from ArcView, and she'll be joining us in a couple of weeks. So hi, Carolyn. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey.
All right. Well, should we call out the answer?
Let's do it.
And before we do, Swami, Nikki, do you have any thoughts on this? How many participants claim spiritual motivation for cannabis consumption?
Yeah, the more the better.
Well, actually, when we were in the green room, you tipped us off to the answer to this, so I'm not going to reveal it, but I'm actually quite surprised at the number that shows up. I don't think I would have picked that number, so I'll leave it at that when you want to reveal it to everyone on the call.
All right. By the way, I think it's the yellow room, not the green room, just because we're so color coded here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Not the rainbow room?
The rainbow room. There you go. All right. Let's check out the answer.
Mm-hmm. And it's B, 25%. Carolyn, you got it right. Nice work.
That's right. And so the study found evidence of a group of spiritual cannabis consumers who tend to regard cannabis as an entheogen. And an entheogen, boy, we're really all about words today, aren't we?
We need a glossary just for this episode.
No. So I'll just read it out for those that are listening to us rather than watching us. It's a chemical substance, typically of plant origin, ingested to produce a state of consciousness for religious or spiritual purposes. Yeah. See, that's why I call cannabis the everyday psychedelic, right? If you psychedelics are generally entheogens. That is to say, an entheogen is, enables you to witness the divine presence, is how I would say it. And so, there are many substances that have been used throughout history to make that, jump into the spirit world. But cannabis can help you do it every day, multiple times a day, if you want. And so that's why it's one of your great allies. But also with cannabis, you don't need to jump into that spiritual dimension if you don't want to. It can be more of a you're kind of more driving the awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. You talk about the divine presence. I mean, I'll admit that I'm either often in the past or I'm often in the future, and I'm working my hardest to stay in the present. So that said, let's talk about maybe the best ways to sort of stay in the divine presence. Are there any cultivars that work better helping one with spirituality?
Yes, there are actually. I find that the ones that have mostly, it's about the terpenes again, and the ones that have myrcene and linalool and beta caryophyllene, these would be the ones when those terpenes are predominant. Those are going to be the ones that are going to take you more into a relaxed, calm state of mind, where you're going to be more open to meditation, to yoga, to go with the flow. You're not going to want to do something that's going to just get you wired up, obviously. That's not going to probably bring you closer to God right away. But it's more like these calming ones. For example, even Blue Dream, we kind of laugh about Blue Dream, but it is one that would kind of bring you to that place. We have one that we did this year called Blue Somati that we released it through our club Swami. And that's really that one. What Swami said, he described as it creates an equanimous state of mind. And so that's a combination of wedding cake, watermelon, and blueberry muffin. So somehow those three things,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of myrcene and beta caryophyllene in it. Absolutely.
Well,
It doesn't have the linalool, but it has those others.
But I think I want to put in here that getting away from the terpene percentages, because one of those things that has these fruits, those are esters and phenols that are creating those aromas. And so what we're saying is that it's more the fruity floral nose cannabis examples that are going to take you to a more ethereal spiritual thing. The more gassy, earthy ones, they're going to be more of a zip, get it done, or whatever it is like that. And sometimes the earthy ones are just going to put you to sleep. So if you're really into not thinking about terpenes, think about what is floral and fruit, or floral or fruit in the nose, something that smells like hyacinth or honeysuckle or maybe jasmine or something like that. Something that, well, with the blueberry too, those are the fruits, watermelon and so on, banana, those kind of things are going to be a little more uplifting and so on. But it's also, it's not so much, what you're using or what you're smoking, but it's more like your headset in how you are smoking it. And, we've always talked in psychology, not always, but talked in psychology about set and setting. And so that's very important for how you want to use cannabis spiritually. If you're going to go to the ball game or you're going to go out and party or something like that, yeah, sure, get stoned, fine, great. But if you want it for a more meditative thing, then you set yourself to be in that place. You sit in your meditation seat or you go out in nature. You do something that's going to likewise encourage that. So the setting will encourage this thing. And then the set is your mind state. I'm not going to just flake off. I'm going to get into the spiritual thing of my higher dimensions. So you have to pinpoint that your own, decide to use it rather than just letting supposedly the cultivar take you there, which it will, but you have to want it.
No, you're right, Swami. The intention needs to be there. But it is good to do a cannabis that's going to slow you down, because that's going to help you focus on your breathing and meditation and just getting to that, what we were just talking about before, being here now, right? That kind of state of mind. That's exactly what you'd be looking for in that sense. We did, the ones we grew last year that were very much in this ballpark would have been the Raspberry Parfait and Royal Highness, both very fruity kind of things, as well as this other one. And I don't know, maybe this is power of suggestion, but the lemon sour diesel, because we call it LSD, seems to really get you out of your body, and again, I don't know if it's the power of suggestion, but that one really does kind of get you up there. It truly does. And I just want to also, we do not breed our own seeds. We get them from friends of ours in the area who are professional, been breeding for generations actually, and in this specific area. So we know they're going to go well with our climate and geography. And one of those breeders is a very beautiful man named Daniel Morford at Heart Rock Farms. And Daniel's a third generation breeder, and he's also a poet. He's just got the heart of a poet too. And he once told me something that really kind of summed it up. He says, when you cultivate love, it grows. And where love grows, so does everything else. So, when you've got a farmer that's putting that kind of message into what they're cultivating, that alone is going to also inspire that plant, because cannabis is a very psychic plant and picks up what's being told it. Actually, it listens to what we're talking about and thinking about around it, that it will impart that love as well. So when you smoke it, again, another thing about sun-grown craft, each plant is treated with such love and respect, and that comes through in the final product. And if you're going to sit down and try to do a meditation or something, who could ask for more than that in the plant smoking? So
we have a fantastic question that I want to pose to both of you from our audience, which is, are there any philosophical or metaphysical frameworks that you find useful with your relationship with cannabis as it pertains to exploring altered states of consciousness and reality?
That's a good question.
Sure is.
Philosophical, metaphysical framework. Well, yes. Actually, it's something I've been working on for quite some time now, which is a meditation on the chakras, which I'm sure anyone who's done yoga is familiar with the word chakra, and those are your energy centers in your spinal column. And of the 5 lower centers from the throat down, each one of those has a sensory faculty assigned to it. So for the first I call them energy wheels. The first energy wheel at the base of the spine, the perineum, that's the root energy wheel, right? And that's associated with your olfactory sense, the faculty of smell, right? And the second one, the second energy wheel in the genitals, that's with the taste. And the third one in the solar plexus is sight, and the fourth one in the heart is the touch, tactile sense, and the fifth one in the throat is a sense of hearing. And then in the third eye, they are all in their most theoretical abstract form. And so as you meditate, you go through each one of these energy centers, and you first of all energize the sense of smell, and then you sort of turn it off, and then you move up to the next one, and you're now in the taste, the gustatory sense, and you energize that, and then you turn it off. And as you go up and up, you turn off each one of these sensory inputs until you then are now not getting any distraction, and now you're in the higher mind. And I'll let it go at that, but that's the kind of metaphysical structure that I'm working on. And I made a translation of the meditation totally into English. And so it's made it actually much clearer to me. So that's one way you can use. And so if you do cannabis before you do that, then you are totally focused in on any one of those and highlight it.
And I'd like to say something to that too. Actually taking the word framework kind of literally here. Yantras are things in Hinduism and other traditions. It could include the Star of David, for example, where you have sacred geometry. And like a mantra is the spoken word, a yantra is going into a spiritual state through visual, looking at the yantra. So I don't know if you can see it. For example, let's see, can you see that? This is a Shri yantra around my neck, which is the mother of all yantras, and it's all of these intersecting triangles. So we plant our garden in that shape. We have plants at the intersection of each one of the triangles. So if you're in a drone, you look down, you're going to see the Sri Yantra. So this is actually literally incorporating a framework, a metaphysical framework, into the cannabis that we're growing. And then that power, that Shakti, is imbued into the plants as they're growing.
So that's the design, the geometric design she's talking about. But the geometric design is energized through sound. And so along with a yantra always comes a mantra. And a mantra is a chant, a sound, which invokes and actually becomes the energy that fills the geometric diagram of the yantra. And so when we plant the plants, we put them at the foot of the goddess of cannabis, Ganjama, and there's a mantra that we chant for the seeds. And then when we plant them, we again chant that mantra for the seeds, so that the intention is there, the setting, that's the set. We're making this plant as a spiritual tool, a spiritual ally and guide. And so it's laid out in that sacred design, and the mantra is invoking the energy, and the goddess of cannabis is sitting out in the garden supervising it all.
Wow. That's
beautiful.
It really is. It really is. And I have online, I've seen from above your wonderful gardens. So it's so interesting that you take that intention and you actually build it out into the physical world. I think that's pretty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to our audience participation number 2, which talks about religion and really the openness of religious folks versus non-religious folks to cannabis. So our next audience participation is really a true or false question, and the question is: U.S. adults who are affiliated with a religion are less likely than unaffiliated adults to support legal cannabis. Is this true or false? And it's interesting considering, so audience, this is your chance to shine again. Is this a true or false answer? But, going back to everything we've just spoken about, it would seem that religious people might be more inclined to, to support the legalization of cannabis because of this historical references throughout time. So I'm curious. I'm curious to hear. Pat says A, which is true. So I'm curious, as we're talking through this, Nikki, Swami, do you have a sense of modern day current U.S. adults who are affiliated with religion? Are they less likely, or more?
Yeah.
Somebody put an F.
I would
False.
say it's interesting that it's only in the United States, because if this was in other countries, I would probably have a different answer that I would consider. But in the United States, considering religion here can be such a conservative Christian bent to it, or a conservative, Jewish bent, or conservative, every kind of bent, it seems to go that way a little more. I'd have to say that the conservatives would probably say false, or not agree with it. But although I know there's a lot of new age people that would absolutely say, yes, it's
Well, no, but
absolutely
you're
does.
confusing the question.
Am I?
True
Okay.
says they're more likely to not approve it.
Okay.
Right?
So true, to not approve. So I'm afraid that's probably the truth here. But like I'm saying, there are a lot. And if I'm in California, I'd say maybe that false. For the rest of the country, I just don't know what to think of what they're thinking out there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's the answers you could see are obviously mixed. So let's jump to the answer. And the answer is true. So U.S. adults who are affiliated with a religion are less likely than affiliated adults to support legal cannabis. And just to go through this is, by the way, from the Pew Research Center. And it was the survey was taken in November of last year. So it's probably about 10 months old. But quickly, U.S. adults who are affiliated with a religion are less likely than religiously unaffiliated adults to support broad legal cannabis. And among those people who identify with any religious group, 54% believe cannabis should be legal for medical and recreational use, while 35% say only legal for medical use. And then finally, among unaffiliated people, those who describe themselves as religiously as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, 76% say cannabis should be legal for both medical and recreational purposes, while just 20 say legal cannabis should be restricted to medical use. So it's really interesting, that I think, Nikki, you hit the nail on the head, which is, that those that are more religious tend to be more conservative and therefore less supportive of cannabis. But, this just struck me as really interesting, considering that typically those that are more religious are more spiritual. And you would think that they might be open to the legalization of cannabis and to consuming cannabis in a way that might support and invigorate their spiritual journey. So it's interesting to see that that's not the case. And I think you're right too. I think the U.S. is very different than probably most other countries around the world, for sure, in terms of those types of perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, David, if I can interject, this gets back to my original, what is my passion, which is, if more of these religious-based people knew about the possibility of finding God through cannabis, they would probably love that. So it's really all about changing this image and getting the education out there.
And I'd also like to put in that there are actual, in India and in various Muslim countries, there are sects that use cannabis, right? Particularly amongst the Muslims, especially, maybe not so much these days, but in more recent past, the Sufi sect of the Muslims would go into ecstatic dancing, sometimes called dervish dancing, and they would often use not so much cannabis, but hashish, of course, derived from cannabis, as their inspiration to get high and dance, right? And so that's an important realization. And likewise, the sects of Hindu holy men, usually wearing orange in India, they start the day wake and bake with a chillum of hash and tobacco. So there are places where cannabis is an actual sacrament in the religion.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's super interesting to have that context there. And if you don't mind, if I just go back for one quick second, you mentioned earlier a couple of really interesting sounding cultivars, and I wanted to know more about your Club Swami, which I think you mentioned some of those are available through Club Swami.
Yeah. Club Swami is something, again, all about changing the image and bringing this up to another level. We started Club Swami so that real true cannabis connoisseurs could have access to our very, very best cultivars. So this is what we're saving specifically for them. So being a member ensures that you have access to that, and then you get a quarterly drop, which we can deliver to your home, or even better, you come to the event, because I love putting on the parties, and that's what that's where I get my joy. So you get to come to these events 4 times a year. We have one in Southern California and one in Northern California, and hang out with Nikki and Swami and smoke some fabulous weed and have some snacks. And we usually have some sort of a guest person there that we're going to introduce to talk to everyone. And they're a lot of fun. I mean, this next one coming up, actually, the one in San Francisco is going to be very spiritual with some very new age kind of music. People there presenting some music that is based on cannabis. And so we try to bring it in, where the one in LA is going to be a pool party, because it's LA and you have a pool party.
Of course.
So, we're trying to cater it to the people in those areas, and really to create a community. Again, so much of this cannabis is a community creator if you let it be. And so many people remain still bogged down by the stigmas related to it, that they can't even talk to the person in the next cubicle in their office and tell them that they get high, because they're still got this stigma. So that's what Club Swami is about, breaking that stigma and creating
and the way we go about it is having a place where people who love cannabis can come together and find other people who love cannabis, and they're not ashamed to talk about it. Nobody's rolling their eyes or whatever it is, and aren't very many places that you can do that. And just so think about alcohol, where there's all these bars and everything. This is a place where you can come and just celebrate being with people who are really excited about cannabis, and you get to smoke, 3 or 4 new ones that you've never had before. So
That's amazing.
Club Swami.
Club Swami. Well, thank you. Right. Great minds think alike. So check out Club Swami. Swami, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today. This was truly enlightening, and you shared so much. I'm now have so many thoughts in the back of my mind. I'm going to go start looking things up on the internet and finding out and seeking a little bit more. So thank you. I hope the audience feels the same way. We really appreciate what you do on a daily basis and what you've done for years, and really bringing the true sense of cannabis to the masses. Thank you so much for everything you do. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thanks so much to both of you for understanding this and respecting it. It means a ton, really a ton. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Much love. Om Namah Shivaya.
Thank you. Wow, that was.
I love them. That was so special.
I know. And look, we have Angela Pye, one of our favorites. Thanks, Angela, for joining us too. Well, as I always say at the end of our show, or close to the end of our show, it's the fastest 45 minutes of my week. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've got a couple of more things to call out briefly. Next week, August 24th, we'll be chatting with Roz McCarthy. And Roz is the founder of Black Buddha Cannabis and Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And we will be chatting with her about cannabis and communities of color. And we also,
which is actually September 14th, not August 24th. Sorry.
No, actually, I'm sorry. Did I call that out the wrong date?
Yes. Okay, we're in September now.
Yes, I did.
We took a spiritual journey back to August, but now we're back in the present.
That's right. Okay, shame on me. Yes, next Thursday at 11 a.m. PST and 2 p.m. EST, we'll be joined by Roz, and we'll be talking about cannabis and communities of color. Thank you, Adriana. I appreciate that. And lastly, we'd like to call out High Hopes again, our first sponsor of our show. Thank you so much for believing in us. Again, a boutique agency with over 10 years of experience in the cannabis industry, so they know what we live on a daily basis, and they know how to help us through and walk through some of the most difficult things that we do, which is really branding, marketing, packaging, website development, and all the things that SEO and all the other things that they do. So again, be sure to check them out at I'veGotHigherHopes.com. Lastly, You can always follow our podcasts on all of the major platforms. Be sure to check out Branding Bud, Cannabis's best kept secret, at brandingbud.com. And feel free to follow us. And we thank everybody, as usual, for joining us every Thursday. Adriana, thank you for being the best co-host in the industry. And we love everybody. And with that, we'll send everybody on their spiritual journey today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.